Welcome back to the Real Estate Jam session. We've got a good one today. Investment strategies for acquiring vacant and distressed assets. Something that is really hot out there right now. Everybody's calling all the time saying, hey, do you have any distressed assets? And currently we don't. But I do think it's a great topic that we need to talk about. And Raphael Collazo is coming on today. He's a commercial real estate broker out of Louisville, Kentucky. And he also has a podcast, CRE Academy Podcast, that he does every week. Very up on this stuff. So he was willing to come on and talk to us about it today. So get your pen and paper ready, because I think he's going to give us a lot of great talking points and things that you can follow through with. So now, if you're new to the channel, my name is Joe Killinger. I've been a real estate entrepreneur for over 20 years. I've done brokerage, investment sales, investment acquisitions, and I've been a founder in a few real estate companies. So you've got the channel that you can really learn from. So make sure you subscribe and make sure you like this video as well. Thank you. All right, welcome to the Real Estate Jam session. I've got a great one today. Investment strategies for acquiring vacant and distressed properties. And for that, I asked Raphael Collazo to come on. Raphael's been a commercial real estate broker in Louisville, Kentucky for many years. He also has a podcast called the CRE Academy Podcast. So he's well-versed in all aspects of commercial real estate and also acquiring assets that are distressed. So Raphael, thanks for coming on today.
Definitely. No, thank you for inviting me on. And as far as many years is concerned, I've actually not been in the commercial real estate brokerage for many years, but I've gained a lot of experience through, just being extremely active in the market. And obviously, as you mentioned, with the podcast and everything else, I've been able to learn quite a bit over the last couple of years. Yeah,
having the podcast, you get guests on, you really can learn a lot from them, which I'm hoping to do today. So walk us through, if I want to go out and start acquiring vacant or distressed assets. Let's start with, how do you source them? First of all, how do you go out and find these properties?
Yeah, I mean, there's various ways to do it. Obviously, you have to know whether or not they are in fact vacant. A lot of times that's just driving around and looking for properties in an area that you may or may want to be located in, or maybe you think would be a good area for a business to be located in. So that's, I think, the first step. Second is what I do a lot of is actually postcards. So I send out postcards to different owners within a certain region, certain area. And, you can tailor the message to be, hey, is your property vacant or whatever? Feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to be able to discuss further with you. So, tailoring your message. Go ahead.
Yeah, that is something that it doesn't work in LA. So I suppose it might be area specific, right? But in LA, our return on that was less. I think it's 0.08%. It was a terrible return, but okay. What else do you do?
Sure. That obviously. And again, like you said, it is geographically specific. Actually, that's been one of the more effective ways that I've been able to generate some of these opportunities was through postcards, and then retargeting on social platforms. So, if they do in fact reach out, now we can retarget them on Facebook, Google, however else. So your face is always in front of them. Another way to do it is good old fashioned cold calling. I mean, you just reach out to the individual owner and just kind of see what their status is. Some people may not be super receptive to that, but if you keep in contact with them over time and continue to add value, obviously it's a certain point in time, they may be willing to discuss the opportunity to be able to sell that property. And then again, in your investor community, I mean, getting involved in these different networking opportunities, there's investors out there that may have a property that they've wanted to do something with, and maybe something else came up, or they're in a financial pinch. At that point, you can say, okay, well, let's try to see if we can work out a deal to be able to take that off your hands, essentially. So those are just a few ways to do it, but I don't know any other strategies that you've employed that could be of value to the audience.
Mostly for us in LA is cold calling. The retargeting, I don't know if people, retargeting is that once they hit your social and then they don't respond to you, your social automatically responds to them after a certain amount of days, correct?
Well, no, so what it means is that if they were to go to your website, for example, it'll take their IP address, and then anytime they're searching on Google or something, if you have a retargeting, it'll show your website or some sort of ad that you've created that kind of just retargets them. So they could be scrolling through Facebook and they see your face and it says maybe tired of being a landlord. XYZ, right? And that
Right.
just gets put in front of them on a regular basis. So you're just remain front of mind, and maybe 6 months, 12 months, or whenever down the road, if they decide, hey, you know what, I'm kind of sick of dealing with this property. Well, I know one person. I mean, how many people do you know out there that know a ton of commercial agents? We're not the most common people out there. So it's, typically
most people don't like us,
Yeah.
like,
I mean, yeah, we're like lawyers, right? No,
yeah, exactly.
not so much, but it's true. But I mean, again, you don't know that many agents out there. So
Right.
if you're the first person they think of, the likelihood of them reaching out to you is relatively high.
Top of mind. And that's really why we push with we have a commercial brokerage here in LA, just so you know, Raphael, and we have 14 agents, and we tell them at least a couple times a week, stay on social, put something out that adds value. Even if in your retargeting, you're putting something out about the marketplace, something that piques these people's interest, bring value to them, that keeps you top of mind to them. So now, do you guys use a lot of brokers for when you're acquiring assets?
So personally, no. I mean, I represent people who are acquiring some of these assets, and typically I'm on the retail side. So, I've helped clients that are looking for vacant buildings and they own a certain type of business. So for example, I helped a gentleman to acquire convenience stores, right? So they acquire a vacant building. This was an old medical, it wasn't a medical call center, right? But it was a block building. What they did is they bought the building, broke down the walls, and now it's a convenience store. He leased it out to a convenience store owner, and now he's getting a pretty good return on his investment because he was able to buy the vacant building, just tear down some walls, put up some paint, move in some of the convenience clients that he knew, and then it's off to the races. So that's more of a standalone property. And then obviously on the retail side, from a shopping center perspective, it's again targeting assets that are in solid areas with high traffic counts, pretty good demographics, and then the tenant mix, considering what the tenant mix looks like. So
yeah, we've got a couple of agents that do deals around the country, and and the reason I bring up the brokers is, these guys all talk to each other. They'll call each other a day or two in advance to listen. I'm going to put this on the market in 48 hours. If you have somebody for this, bring it to me now before it hits the open market. So I think it's always a good thing if you are a broker that you're out there networking, or if you're a buyer, you should be making sure that your agent is out there networking for you within the brokerage community.
100%. Yeah, I agree. And there's definitely situations where I'm listing a property. I call a select few people that I know can execute, and I know or have the capital to be able to do so. And then I say, hey, by the way, this is coming to market. If this isn't something you're interested, that's fine. But if it is, let me know. We'll try to get the offer in front of the owner, so we can get this squared away even before it goes to market sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we see that quite often. Now, I saw in some of your the paperwork that we have on you that you're doing some self-storage. How is that going back in Louisville?
So I'm not personally doing self-storage.
I mean, well, you're brokering.
Our brokerage has done self-storage in the past, and it can be a phenomenal property type. I mean, my broker was involved in several deals where one was an acquisition of a property that was an existing self-storage facility, and another was just the land. So they acquired the land, developed the property, and now it's operational as a self-storage facility. We actually interviewed a lady named Masha Klapanova. She's a self-storage investor, and I think they bought their first property last year in North Carolina, and she's under contract on her second property. But she kind of talked about the things to look for when it comes to self-storage investing. And obviously, depending on what area you're in, the demand for self-storage is different. I'm sure in LA, the square footage that each person utilizes is going to be different than it is here in Louisville versus Texas versus whatever. So obviously it's market specific, but there's various different variables that you need to consider when you're looking at some of these opportunities, because there may be a vacuum when it comes to supply, in which case it's like, okay, buying a property in that environment is phenomenal, and maybe even the potential for expansion, because it's not only just self-storage within the units. You could have RV parking, you could have boat parking, you could have all these different other revenue streams without having to, construct buildings. You just put in, like a little tarp, not tarp, but you can have the covering, and, it's off to the races.
Yeah. All right. So acquiring vacant properties, postcards, cold calling, brokerage community. How are you finding your best success with distressed assets? Kind of the same way, or are you talking to lenders? What else are you out there doing?
Yeah, so actually, I've considered incorporating more on the lender side
Yeah.
recently. I haven't done a lot of that as of late, I must admit, but I know other people who have had a lot of success establishing relationships with lenders and becoming their kind of go-to brokerage when it comes to their distressed assets. As far as what I've been doing, the most success, like I said, has been postcards, individually reaching out to people, and I think this is one of the reasons why I think building a brand is so important, is because let's say that I reach out to someone and leave a voicemail, because 95% of the time you're not going to get in contact with the owner, right?
Right.
They're going to see your call. They'll let it go to voicemail. You leave a message. Well, what happens? They look you up. Some do, some don't, but some do. And if they do look you up and you have, I've written a book. I've written Before You Sign That Lease, the Small Business Owner's Guide to Lease Commercial Space. I do a ton of YouTube videos. I have podcast episodes. So now what happens? Now when they're doing the research, they start clicking in it. They see a few of my videos. They see what I'm about, and that increases the likelihood of them potentially reaching back out. So it's about building that trust. So even if
Right.
they don't respond on the first attempt or second attempt, by the third attempt, if they've done some research on me, the conversation is different. And I've noticed that when it comes to my outreach efforts.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you're putting a lot of content out there, so your name's going to come up when somebody's thinking about who's. It does build trust. If they see that you've been out there, you've been in business a while, they're going to be more likely to trust you and want to do deals with you, because the old saying is, we talk to people we know or communicate with people we know, but we do business with people we trust. And having that content out there showing that you are a professional in this industry really does help. All right. So now I used to do distressed assets, and we started, now this was probably before you were out of high school, but we would just call directly to Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, all the banks, 2008, 2009, we were really going at it. And then, in the late 90s as well. But we just started calling on banks all the time. And we really built a good book of business up there. I haven't done it for a long time, so I'm not really sure how it was. I know we used to call the OREO department or the REO department, seeing what they had coming. But I honestly haven't heard on foreclosures lately. Have you been hearing anything about foreclosures ticking up at all?
No, not really. I mean, and again, I think part of the reason for that is that the stimulus that we had received
Right.
within the economy. I know a lot of business owners that obviously the PPP loans helped immensely when it came to
Sure.
kind of just stabilizing their cash flow over that period of time. So I don't necessarily, I haven't seen it as of yet, but I do believe that at some point there will be some sort of correction. It always happens. It's
Right.
I don't think it's going to be anywhere near what we saw in 2008, but at some point there probably will be some sort of correction. But yeah, I haven't heard anything about tick up in foreclosures. And again, a lot of banks obviously as well, we're granting some sort of abatements, not necessarily abatements, but adding on the mortgage payments that were due in a particular
Sure.
time and adding it to the back of the loan. So there's a lot of things that the economy as a whole had done to be able to kind of level out the foreclosures
Right.
that would have occurred had that not been in place. So
Well, I think, another thing, just driving these communities and seeing these vacant properties, landlords can only hold on so long. They've got to figure out what to do. They got to pay the taxes. Maybe they don't have a loan against it, great. But, you've got to create your own opportunity when you're buying these distressed assets or these vacant properties. So you've got to go out and create it by doing the work that you're talking about with the mailers, with the cold calls, with the driving the areas. And I think that's truly a way to really find success in acquiring these assets. Tell us a little bit about your book you brought up. I'm interested.
Yeah, sure. So, and again, I've been in the business for about 2.5 years now, so still relatively new, but I hit the ground running pretty good because of the fact that I put out a ton of content, and I started working a lot with leasing properties. And I started working with different entrepreneurs and business owners that were looking for new spaces. And I noticed a lot of them were asking similar questions. A lot of them had bad experiences in the past as a result of missing one or two things within the leasing process. And I thought, what better way to kind of help streamline the process than to write a book explaining the commercial leasing process? And that's where the idea for Before You Sign That Lease came into being. And so I created a book that essentially gave a step-by-step guide to just explain how do you get from point A to point B when it comes to commercial leasing. And I'm working on my next book right now that's called Before You Buy That Building. So if you're looking to purchase commercial property, this is exactly the book you're going to need. And again, it's market specific. So there's going to be things that are not necessarily highlighted in the book because, maybe in your market, there's a slight tweak or differentiation within the process. And that's why at the beginning of the book, I always say, surround yourself with solid team members.
Right.
Get your commercial lawyer on your side, get a solid commercial real estate agent, get an accountant, commercial contractor, et cetera. And then from there, it's like, what are the big picture components of buying a commercial property that now will help you get to the finish line more effectively? So,
well, I think if you're an investor and you're going to be working with small business operators, your book could be very powerful in that, you need to know what this small business person is going to go through. And you better know their business just as well as they can if you're going to do a long-term lease. So that's when you brought it up. That's why I thought, well, we better touch on this, because I really think if there's any way that an investor can educate themselves, they should look at every opportunity. And, something like that, to know that what the small business operator is going to go through, they need to understand the potential tenants' margins, income, expenses, projections. Because, I talk to a lot of small business operators here in LA that they have this idea for a business, but when you start asking that, well, let's walk through your business plan, your financials, they're going to really struggle when you sit down and show it to them. It's sometimes, as you know, Raphael, it's kind of hard. You kind of deflate their balloon, right? But you're actually saving them a lot in the end. So, but as a landlord, you need to know that stuff. So we'll definitely put that out there. But all right, Raphael, you have any more tips for any of our viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to harp on what you just said pertaining to small business owners, in particular when it comes to if you being a landlord, right? Because like you said, you have to understand the business of those individuals that you're bringing into your, let's say in the retail setting, into your center. So, what are the margins of a bike shop? What are the margins of a bakery? What are the and getting a really good feel of that so that you can create a symbiotic relationship within the center. Because a lot of times what I see investors do is that they have this idea where it's like they're going to try to squeeze the juice as much as they can out of each and every tenant that they have, but they don't think about the opportunity cost of that decision, because at some point that business owner may not be able to survive, and if they go out of business, how long is your space going to be dark for? And then okay, what does 6 months cost you on your returns when it comes to your pro forma that you created 3-4 years ago? It's going to kill your returns. So it's one of those things where it's it's a back and forth. It's creating that symbiotic relationship between the business owner and the investor. And those that do that tend to be successful over a long period of time. So that's kind of,
couldn't agree more. I think that's very powerful advice. Well, all right, everybody, make sure you check out CRE Academy Podcast with Raphael. How often is it a weekly podcast?
It is a weekly podcast. I also run several meetups, one being the Commercial Real Estate 101 meetup, where we meet bi-weekly via Zoom, and we invite speakers to talk about all different types of topics. Our last one was on adaptive reuse. Next one's going to be on affordable housing. And then at the end of the month in December, I'm going to be kind of doing an overview of all the speakers that we had and try to give like lessons about what we learned over the course of the year. Okay. And so, yeah, it's great. We've had a lot of great connections that have been made through that meetup, from all across the country.
Okay. So. Well, what I'll do, Raphael, is I'm going to put those links to those at the bottom of the video. So everybody, make sure you go down and if you can connect, I'm going to put Raphael's info there as well, so you can connect. Raphael, thank you very much for coming on today. I think your information was very powerful for our subscribers.
No, I appreciate you inviting me on. And what's interesting is actually when I first was starting to get in the commercial real estate business, I watched a lot of your videos. So thank you. Thank you for everything you do. Really did. I really did.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And for you watching the show today, thank you for tuning in. We will see you in just a couple days again. If you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe and please like this video. Thank you.